for our Bible study tonight. We are coming to you live on YouTube. We're still having difficulty. StreamYard and Facebook are having difficulty connecting. They apparently are working on this issue, and literally people are having the same problem all around the globe, right? So hopefully it'll be fixed soon, as we do rely on Facebook quite a bit. But we are thankful for this account we have with YouTube, and we're able to still bring you quality teaching, quality study, and opportunity for engagement. I want to say, as we get started, I do appreciate the feedback. And so, although you're maybe more accustomed to doing comments via StreamYard, uh, via Facebook, I do want you to go ahead and know that I welcome you to also comment on YouTube, and both while we are live, when we are streaming live, and later if you're watching it at a later time or a different time zone. Well, having said that, I want to begin tonight by saying thank you to all of you that made St. Luke's 74th church anniversary, and Pastor Matthews, myself, my 24th anniversary, such a smashing success. I am still enjoying the moments. I'm still in cloud nine based upon all the things that have occurred. And we are so grateful and thankful for all that you have done. We have a lot of things planned so that we do not lose the summer, right? And so we have this thing that we're calling Summer Sizzle, or Sizzling Summer at St. Luke. Sizzling Summer at St. Luke. Part of that would be that this is our last Bible study in this series. We'll pick back up the second Wednesday in June, where we will start part of Sizzling Summer at St. Luke. It's kind of like a tongue twister. We'll pick up on the second Wednesday in June, when we will come together for our summer book club, and we're going to be reading the book together, Cast: The Origins of Our Discontents. This is a best-selling book. It is very insightful, very, very powerful. And I want you to know that I invite you now to get ready for this study. There'll be a QR code coming up later this week. If not before Sunday, definitely by Sunday. I really want you to use the QR code to register for it. There'll be a link there where if you need to order the book, you can order it. You can also purchase it at a local bookstore. You can't get it on Kindle. It's not a digital format as of yet. It is important that you register for this study, for this book club, because we're going to be using a study guide that, once you register, the Wednesday before the first session, so on June 5th, we will send you digitally via the digital media. We'll send you the study guide that we'll use throughout this book club time together. So I'm looking forward to it. Listen, this is open to folk who are in Charlotte, persons who are not part of St. Luke or are part of St. Luke. It's open to family members and friends. It'll be a wonderful opportunity for you to have a group of your friends or colleagues to come together on this platform with us for the book club, and go ahead and let's study this together. It's going to be a robust conversation. It's going to be a real good look at where we have been, where we are, and how do we go forward as a people that's moved beyond caste. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, tonight, again, is our last study in this particular series, Got Life. And tonight, we're going to begin to look at a topic that I think is very important for us to study. And this is the topic of validation. What I want to suggest tonight is that part of our overcoming the barriers to the life that Jesus promised, part of that is definitely being able to come together with an awareness of our need to go ahead and deal with the fact that we need to create safe spaces for our being able to have validation. All right. So thank y'all in advance. I'm over here looking at, I got so many things going on here. I got my notes here. I'm looking at the camera. I got my iPad here where I can see the PowerPoint better. Maybe I should, I don't know. Listen, I'll figure it out eventually, right? But that's where we are right now. So anyway, let's get started. Session 4, creating spaces of validation. I want to just pick up where we are currently, where we have been. We have looked at the text is John 10:10, where Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. We looked at the reality that it was Jesus's purpose and our possibility. That is to say, Jesus said, I've come, Greek text, in order that. So he came for the purpose of giving life, but our possibility that you might, subjunctive case in the Greek text, which is the mode of possibility. We have posited, I think, effectively that having a relationship with Jesus or confessing a relationship with Jesus isn't a guarantee that you have this Zoe, this kind of life, that just this robust kind of life that is life that keeps on living. There is no guarantee that you will have that kind of life if you simply have a relationship with Jesus. There are some things that we have to do. There are some barriers that get in the way, right? In our fallen context, there are some things that get in the way that can literally keep us from the good life. So we can have a confession that Jesus Christ is Lord and be living lives far from abundance. And abundance doesn't mean money. Abundance doesn't mean a promise that you never get sick. Abundance means that there is a sense that you will have this kind of life that transcends living, that is more than simply just about believing. It is about accessing the possibility that Jesus gave us, right? We looked at the definition and the characteristics of toxic theology. The first barrier that we dealt with was toxic theology. That is to say that our God concepts, the way we see God, ironically, can be the thing that saps the life out of us. It's kind of amazing, right? That you would think that in the context of all this God, that that would be almost a certainty that we are on the right track. But what we showed is how toxic theology can and does rob us of the potential for the abundant life, because it is rooted in rules and regulation, do's and don'ts. It's all about control and manipulation. It's about threatening languages and posture. If you don't do this, God is going to get you. It's all about positing God in a way that God is this figure who is out to get you anytime you do something wrong, that if you slip up, God is going to hit you. It is a theological frame that sees in disaster and pain, it sees God's revenge. It's almost gloating about it. All of that is toxic. And what we showed is that toxic theology isn't just limited to cults, but that toxic theology, that kind of manipulative framing, that kind of belief in a God that is against humanity, a God that's out to crush humanity, that kind of framing runs rapid throughout the Christian church. And most of us, well, many of us would say we grew up with that. We understand what that means, right? And so in order to have this abundant life, this life that keeps on living, we need to be clear about how we need to overcome toxic theology. Pressing on real quick, we looked at last week for the last 2 weeks, mental health as a barrier to this abundant life that Jesus spoke of, right? Mental health. We looked at the unique challenges confronting Black bodies and mental health. And we looked at how we need to confront the stigma and seek help. We examined biblical texts where we looked at what would be considered today mental health illnesses, from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression. We looked at those things from suicidal thoughts and ideation, all of that trauma-based kind of stuff that people went through. We examined that. We looked at that. And we understand that we don't have to live a life that is not full because we have somehow equated mental health and mental health challenges as a curse or against God's, that somehow to have it, to embrace it, would be somehow to disavow or to bring into question God. No, mental health does not make you, mental health challenges don't make you less of a person, just like diabetes doesn't, lupus doesn't, right? It is what it is, and we have to seek help for that. And we talked about some signs when it's time to seek help. So tonight, I'm going to skip this slide about abundant life. I think we've already exhausted that. I want to go to the next slide that talks about validation. So tonight, we really want to focus on tonight in this study that creating spaces of validation, it is a way to help us have this life that Jesus spoke about, right? Validation is part of this John 10:10 kind of life. If we want to experience it, there needs to be some level of validation, and that validation comes by creating spaces where validation can take place, right? So the first thing you would probably ask is, what does it mean about validation? Now, if you are a person who's into research and you're into science and all of that, you will know that validation is a major part of research, right? Part of what you do when you, doing an experiment or you discover something in the research realm or the scientific realm, you seek to validate it, right? You seek to go ahead and make sure that it is real. You put some framing of validation around it so that that validation certifies or signifies that the discoveries made are real, right? And so when we talk about validation from a sociological or from a human perspective, what do we mean by validation, right? Validation, first of all, it comes from this word, which means to make valid or to confirm, right? But validation from a psychological standpoint it refers to the act of acknowledging, accepting, and affirming an individual's thoughts, feelings, experiences, or identity. It involves recognizing and validating the validity and the legitimacy of a person's emotions, beliefs, and experiences without judgment or criticism. Now, that says a lot, right? It is about being in a space where you are acknowledged, you are accepted, your identity is accepted, your feelings and experiences are valid, they're not dismissed, right? There's some legitimizing of who you are. There is a sense that you're valid, you're okay, right? And it's done in the context free of judgment. It is done in the context where there isn't, a cross-eyed look or some kind of engagement that you feel that you're being judged by someone, right? That is not validation. Validation is rooted in acknowledgement, acceptance, affirmation. It validates feelings, experiences, and identity. That's validation, right? And one of the things that we're going to wrestle with when it comes to validation, and we'll just put it here now, is there is this question that does come up when you talk about validation from, let's say, a psychosocial frame. The question is basically, do we give ourselves validation, or are we to seek validation from external sources? Do we need external validation? External, other people, other systems to give us acknowledgement, acceptance, affirmation, to validate our feelings and experiences and identity. Do we need that, or is it enough that we give to ourselves validation, regardless of whether or not we get any validation outside of ourselves? And to be clear, I want to be transparent if I can for a moment. I have wrestled my own self with what is the fine line, right? Because to be clear, I know it is important to give myself validation, but I also understand that there is a need. We are people who desire community. We desire to be together, right? And so the reality is that there is some measure of need, desire, need, that we also receive acceptance and affirmation of who we are outside of ourselves. And there is a fine line. There is a fine line, right? And the fine line would be, sometimes we do not give ourselves validation, and we seek validation solely outside of ourselves, so that what others give us, others individual, others group, others as systems, what they give us becomes the sole source of our validation. But if they give it, they can also take it away. And then we're left with the fact that so much of who we are and how we feel is predicated on the whims and wishes of others, individuals, groups, systems, right? And so there's a fine line. I want to be clear that I believe that we do and we must give ourselves validation. I believe that wholeheartedly. We must give ourselves validation. But I also believe we need some validation from outside of ourselves, right? And we get this early in life from our first care provider, our first caregivers, parents, grandparents, guardians, community, right? There's so much early in life that we desire and we get from outside of ourselves. So validation, as we talk about it, is a validation that involves self-validation, but also understands the need to have spaces where there is external validation that supports the internal validation. Does that make sense? This is a night I wish we had Facebook up, because I love to see your comments, right? But that's validation, right? And we want to focus on how creating spaces of validation, how doing that really helps us live into the abundant life, the Zoe life, of which John 10:10 speaks, right? So that's what we are focused on and looking at when we talk about validation. So go to the next slide, and we're going to pick up on the next slide. Why is this kind of validation? Why is it important? Why is this kind of validation important? Validation. Why is self-validation and external validation. Why is it important, right? It is important because of issues around affirmation and acceptance. Validation provides us with a series of affirmations and acceptance, helping us feel understood and valued. This can boost self-esteem and confidence, right? Imagine a child when you were a child and you did something and someone said, "Good job. That's awesome." How good you felt, right? You felt good because somebody outside of yourself validated an action and said, "You are good," right? And so that gives you confidence. And we're going to look at, on the flip side of that, how that doesn't always show up early in life, right? So affirmation and acceptance is rooted in validation, right? Why is validation important? Because it gives us emotional support. Validation validates individual emotions and feelings. It helps us to feel heard and validated. This can be important, and especially important in times of distress. Sometimes validation, external validation in particular, that comes to us, that validation gives us the strength to cope with difficult and challenging situations. And that validation doesn't come by persons fixing a situation, but just by being present in an empathetic frame to hear what you said. Sometimes, and I think you all can relate to this, sometimes just knowing that somebody here heard us, that somebody understood what we said, that validates that, okay, we're not losing it. Okay, we're not, off on some tangent, right? And so validation does provide a source and a sense of emotional support. Also, why is validation important? Because of it gives of communication and connection. Validation fosters open and honest communication, creating a sense of connection and understanding between individuals. In other words, it allows for real, honest dialogue, right? Because when the space is validating, it doesn't mean that everybody agrees, but it does mean that who you are matters. Your feelings count. You're not discounted. You're not overlooked. You're not dismissed, right? So all of that is important, and it comes through the issue of validation, okay? And so we look at why is validation important? Validation is important because it gives us a sense of identity and self-worth. Being validated for who we are helps us develop a sense of identity and self-worth. Validation of one's own identity, beliefs, and values can promote self-acceptance and self-awareness. So this is that internal, that self-validation that we give. I want to say this, and I want to be clear about it, and I want to recognize that it may not be easy for some to accept, but if we don't learn how to give ourselves some measure of self-validation, if we don't do that, what happens is that it really stunts our ability to function at our best, right? That if we don't have the ability to look at ourselves and say, "Hey, I'm good with who I am. I'm good where I am," it really creates an opportunity for some manipulation. It creates an opportunity for some it creates. We're going to look at this. So it creates a higher level of perhaps unhealthy vulnerability, right? When you're able to validate yourself, when you're able to give yourself validation, right? When you can do self-acceptance, and you can do that through a lot of self-awareness work, right? When you do that, I want to tell you that it is a way for you to build up your own emotional strength. Okay. And so I want to say that is real, and that is something that we should be very much aware of, is that does now. The last thing, why is validation important? Because it gives us strength to cope with challenges, right? Validating our own experience, whether positive or negative, helps us feel validated and acknowledged. This can give us the ability to cope with challenging situations more effectively. Just by giving ourselves and receiving external validation, we're able to cope better with the challenges that come in life. I don't have to tell y'all, life is full of challenges, right? Validation is important if we're going to live into and become, how can I say it? If we're going to be able to get the most to get this life, we're going to have to understand the importance of validation. All right. The next slide that I want to look at, it talks about, and I want to give this to you now, and I want us to really lean into this. I want to look at the opposite of validation is invalidation, right? What is the consequences when you live a life and you have not received some measure of validation, right? When you have been in situations where you have been invalidated, right? So I want to begin by talking about, I have a book in my hand now. It is by Marsha Linehan, and it's titled Building a Life Worth Living. Now, who is she? And I think this is an important book. One of the modalities that I use as a therapist when I work with individuals, and to be clear, when I work with myself, because it's important that I do self-work myself, right? Is I use the concepts of dialectical behavior therapy. That's one of the modalities that's in my therapeutic toolbox, right? And Marsha Linehan is the individual who, in our lifetime, created dialectical behavioral therapy, right? And her book titled A Life Worth Living really chronicles her own struggles with what was a diagnosis of severe and persistent mental illness that was later understood to be more of a personality disorder. And as she went on to do her PhD in psychology, she began to see how certain techniques that help change, but that was rooted in behavior changes, help to bring about powerful changes in thought, and it also helped to bring about relief, right? And so I want to talk about this whole issue of validation and the negative side of it from a dialectical behavioral frame. And I want to say that while this is true, I would say for you're looking at it from a therapeutic standpoint, I think the negative consequences of invalidation impacts us all, right? So one of the things that DBT does, it talks about how early in life we come into environments that are non-validating, right? We come into non-validating environments, invalidating environments. And these environments are environments where early in life, normally in childhood, we get the clear sense early on that we're not going to get the validation that we need. validation is so important to our ability to grow and develop, right? And so in these non-validating or invalidating environments, what happens is mostly as a child, we are told basically that our feelings don't matter. Suck it up. You're not really hurt. Just get over it. You want a hug or whatever. No, get away from me. You're basically told to be tougher, right? And what we know is that from that posture, there can come a sense that we don't get the validation that we need. The environment, I want you to hear me now. The environment is non-validating or invalidating. And the invalidating environment becomes internalized, or it impacts us. Just like poison would impact fish in the water, non-validating, invalidating environments would impact those in that environment, in that space, right? And one of the things that I would say is, so much of the work that we have to do or try to do in church, Lord help me, Jesus, is we're we are dealing with the residual impacts of persons who early in life did not get the validation they needed. And because of that, it shows up in ways that can be challenging to the intended purposes and work of the church, right? If we're not careful, we can overlook the fact that while we let me go on and talk about something else. I'm gonna get back to this because I don't want to move this point. I'm trying to get my slides back up here. So one of the side effects, one of the consequences of growing up, coming up, or being in a non-validating, invalidating environment. Now, that could be early in life and as a child, that could be in a group, it could be at a system or job, it could be even at church. We're gonna look at that later. One of the things about being in that environment, get this now, when you're not validated, it produces emotional dysregulation. What's emotional dysregulation? You're just not in a space where you're controlling your emotions, right? They're like they're like a swing, right? It's just you go off easy, you become emotional really easy. Your emotional dysregulation is present because of a lack of validation. When you're not validated, when you're in a non-validating environment, it does have the impact on our self-esteem. If you're in a situation where you are told constantly that you're not any good, that you're less than, that you're not smart, that you're not gifted. I'm not going down the Help, right? The Help movie, right? But when you're constantly told that you're not those things, you're not cute, you're ugly, stick to the books because good looks ain't what you got. When you're constantly told these kind of things, it does impact our self-esteem. And I want to save time to get to let me press on. We got 20 minutes left because I want to really drive home why this is important. We talk about church, right? When you have a lack of validation, not only does it produce emotional dysregulation, impacts our self-esteem, but it also, get this now, results in interpersonal conflicts. I kind of hit it at that, right? Sometimes the reason why people don't get along is not really based upon what a particular event or act was. It's just you're probably dealing with two people or a person who, because of a lack of validation, has turned to has has acted out of their emotional dysregulation, and it makes having relationship difficult. It's hard to have relationship, whether it be romantic and intimate, whether it be collegial or professional. It's hard to have relationships that are meaningful when you have this inability to regulate yourself due to emotion, due to an invalidating environment. That produces interpersonal conflicts, right? So it's one thing to say, get along with somebody, but it's another thing to go beneath the surface and start talking about what's the root of this, and how that works. When you have this invalidating environment, what happens? The consequence is it reinforces negative beliefs. I just kind of mentioned some of that, right? You feel bad about yourself, and that feeling bad about yourself makes you feel bad about yourself going forward, right? You feel bad about yourself today, feel bad about yourself tomorrow. You just keep feeling bad about yourself. Part of that is what happens when we get into these non-validating environments, right? And then this is important. I want to make sure I get this. When you do not have validation, it produces emotional vulnerability. Now, this is what I talked about when it comes to not giving ourselves self-validation, self-acceptance, not doing the work to get to know ourselves. What happens is we are constantly looking for that validating voice, that validating presence outside of ourselves, but those contexts are never perfect because humans are involved. And so what happens is there becomes almost this addictive quality, talk, Cliff, where you're constantly putting yourself out, hoping that somebody, some group, some system will validate you, that you lose emotional restraint, that you become emotionally vulnerable. You have opened yourself up in ways that are not good for who you are, right? And we could talk about this with somebody who is, in our African American context, so determined to get validation from majority culture that they are just, denying, who they are, only to find out that at the end of the day, they're you're still not going to get what you need, right? So part of what we need to do is make sure we are giving emotion, we are helping create validating spaces for ourselves and for others, because to do so does have a positive impact on emotional vulnerability. You can't spill everything to everybody. You can't put yourself out like that for everybody. And you can't go chasing after something that you haven't first given to yourself. All right, teach, Cliff. All right. Now, I want to go on now, and I want to look at, to ground this in Bible. I want us to look at, I told you this before, my favorite Bible passage, for me, is John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9. It is the story of the brother of the individual at the pool of Bethsaida. Now, the scripture for this, and I think we have it coming up, the scripture for this, John 5, 1 through 9, it is about a brother who lay at the pool of Bethsaida. This pool was where folk laid, seeking some kind of healing. Now, what is so clear from John chapter 5, I want to pull up my Bible here. When I look at it in the New Revised Standard Version, what you find is this phrase, and I think it is so important. When they describe this context, it says, go to the next verse. Yeah. Okay. And it said, In these lay many, see that word there? Invalids. Now, when you say invalid, there comes a sense of somebody who is broken, who's weak, who maybe can't walk, can't do something, right? But break that word down in the English. In, not valid. So the context of the pool, I think this is important. The context of the pool was an environment of invalidation, right? Those who were at the pool waiting for something to happen were those who had bore the stamp given by others and internalized in a real way that something's wrong with you. You're not valid. You're not accepted, right? Your voice isn't heard. Your experiences aren't validated. There isn't acceptance and affirmation. Your story isn't one that wants to be heard. There is a posture around the pool that's not validating, right? And it's that context, the environment of invalidation that is so important to understand this story, right? That it was an invalidating context. Now, what is so amazing about the context of invalidation is that for the Johannine writer, in a context of invalidation, get this now, Jesus walks in the context. In an environment where there is this environment of invalidation, Jesus shows up. Now, this isn't a sermon. I ain't trying to preach, but I just want to emphasize that's the kind of Jesus we have, right? What makes him the Savior is that there is this sense that he shows up, that the divine presence walks in context where persons have been made to feel and do feel they're not valid. Jesus shows up. Now, if we want to be clear, Jesus showing up in this context of invalidation doesn't come without risk. Showing up in this context runs the risk that he may be viewed by others as not really understanding the importance of staying clear of those who are invalid. And since there is a sense of guilt by association, one may assume and conclude that Jesus himself may be, that's what some critics may have said, not valid, right? And so Jesus walks around the pool, and notice the conversation that he has with the brother in John 5:1-9. The conversation he has, he asks this brother, do you want to be whole? Do you want to get well? And the brother basically gave this narrative that wasn't really the question. He didn't answer the question. He started talking about what he didn't have. The barriers to validation. The barriers to validation were outside of himself. In other words, whatever he needed to get to validation was something that he did not have in himself. I don't have anybody to put me in the water when the pool is stirred. And so by the time I get there, somebody else got it before I did, right? There isn't this sense that this individual sees the problem that he has, his lack of validation, as being outside of being linked to a lack of resources outside himself. To get validated, I need to have somebody that can throw me in the water when it stirs, right? But if nobody does that, I'm not going to get to validation, right? Okay. So Jesus says this, and I told a colleague today, I was talking to a ministerial colleague today about this study, doing some back and forth about it, right? And one of the things that was clear, and I think both of us had the same understanding, is that this is a different kind of miracle story. I'm clear. I do not categorize this as a miracle story. Now, there's going to be my preaching series this summer is going to be on the miracles of Jesus, right? So there are miracle stories, I believe, but this isn't one of them, I don't think. Because this isn't about Jesus raising the dead, Jesus turning water to wine, Jesus multiplying the fish and the bread, right? No. This is about Jesus spoke to the individual. He didn't touch him. He didn't, say you're healed. What he said to the brother's complaint that my invalidation is linked to a lack of resources outside of myself, Jesus basically said, brother, get up from here and get out of here. Get up, pick up that mat, go somewhere else. That's what Jesus said to him. Brother, get up, pick up your mat, and go somewhere else. And the Bible is clear. The brother got up, picked up his mat, and he went away. Right? This shows us that words have power to empower. Words have power to empower. Words can be used to bring about some level of validation. Words can be used to bring about some measure of validation to those who had not received it. But the word that was given spoke not to the outside resources, but it spoke about the need for the brother to give himself what was already his, and that is his own self-validation. And when Jesus said, get up and get out of here, the brother did what he probably could have done a long time ago. Y'all see that? He did what he could have probably done a long time ago had someone simply spoke to let him know, bro, listen, you don't need nobody to help you in the water. What you really need to understand is you're in a context, in an environment where everything says invalid, invalid, invalid. And that context, that environment has diminished your self-worth. It has resulted in you having a set of negative beliefs, right? It has left you emotionally vulnerable. And so all you need to do to get what you need, the validation, is to get up and walk out of here. That's what you have to do. And the brother did that. Notice validation was experienced, but get this now. When the validation was experienced, there was an immediate environmental change. You better talk, Cliff. You're teaching good today, sir. That when you experience validation, you become so determined not to go back to a posture of invalidation that you will change the environment that you're in to protect the validity that you have. You better talk, Cliff. That's good. Yeah. You won't let anyone, any group, any system take you back to invalidation, right? Because you know now what it feels to be validated. Now, the question that I often ask, and I want to answer tonight, but what about the others at the pool? I wasn't there, but I want to suggest that this story maybe was intended to highlight not just what one got, but to be a message to the others around pools, whether they be at Bethsaida or somewhere else, maybe Bethsaida or Charlotte or Cornelius, Kannapolis, wherever, to let them know that just like this brother was able to get up and to receive validation based upon a word that empowered him to do what he could have done, others who are in environments of non-validation can do the same thing, right? I want to close out because I know my time is about up. If y'all give me a little more time, I want to get this series done because we won't come back next week, all right? So I want to talk about the church as a validator. And I mean church, not so much what meets in the building, but that and where people of Jesus' faith, where they are. That's church, right? I want to say the church ought to be a place of validation. Now, I really have come to this. I really have come to it kind of late, right? But as I do this work around dialectical behavior therapy, and I began to understand the need for validating spaces, one of the things that I became clear about is my affinity for liturgical worship. St. Luke and others know it because I believed for years in having a confession of sin. And that confession of sin basically was to say, in essence, and some older versions say, I'm a wretch undone. I'm not worthy of your love and your acceptance. I'm not worthy of you, dear God. And what I began to understand is if we continue to have that posture, we are really on the verge of some toxicity in our theology. So that's why at St. Luke, we moved away from the confession of sin, get this now, to the declaration of encouragement. And maybe it should be called a declaration of validation, right? That it is so important that church be a place that's validating, that where Jesus people gather, whether under a roof with a steeple or whether at a job site, wherever Jesus people are, there should be either one light or multiple lights of validation that are there, right? And so I say that because Jesus walking around the pool shows Jesus as a validator. And if we are the hands and feet of Jesus, if we are the ones who are to be Jesus's representative, the reality is that being Jesus means that we validate. We spend so much time beating people down with Jesus when Jesus spends so much time building people up, empowering them to live their best lives, to have a life worth living, right? So church ought to be, get this now, a whosoever space. Y'all know this is St. Luke. We are a whosoever church. And one of the things that I'm doggedly determined about, won't be any mess in St. Luke. There won't be any name calling. There won't be any acting out of character. There won't be any bashing. There won't be any religious harm done under the name of Jesus by somebody who talks about Jesus but clearly don't know him. Because when people come together, whether it be under the steeple, whether it be on our digital platforms on Sunday or throughout the week, we need to make sure that what oozes through both in the building and over our digital platforms is that you are loved, you are accepted, you are validated, right? Come on, right? You don't have to stay in invalidating environments. Come on. And I also want to say we need to make sure we're practicing, get this now, whole being spirituality. What is that? So there's something called in clinical mental health work, it's called whole body mental health, that you don't separate the mind from the body. That basically what science now is showing us is that you have cognitions both in your brain, but you also have other parts of your body, other parts of you that also transmit thoughts, being, ways, right? Whole being mental health says that you don't just talk about what's on your mind, but don't talk about what's in your belly, right? What are you eating? How is your sleep hygiene, right? Right? What's your environment that you're in? Because if we just focus on your thoughts, but don't focus on the whole being, I think we need to get towards a whole being spirituality. What that means is this: the effectiveness of the church in the disciplines of prayer and worship ought to be judged not by how many people praise God because of the prayer, or how many people got on their feet in worship and lifted hands. The real effectiveness or the validity or the God acceptedness of our spiritual disciplines ought to be, get this now, not only that people learn how to pray, how to worship, how to praise, but people also learn how to give themselves self-validation and become validators for others. You said something good there, Cliff. Yes, you did. So if all you can do is talk about, I love the Lord, but you don't give yourself validation, and you you go around in dysregulation, you have a low view of yourself, you stuck in negative beliefs, all that praying isn't helping. Okay. Y'all ain't talking. I'm gonna get done now. I'm 3 minutes over. All that praying ain't helping. If when you get off your knees after praying all these years and you're no closer to validating yourself and being in a space of validation where you're receiving it from others, and if you're not becoming a validator, get off your knees and try something else. Oh my God. Okay. All right. I'm done. I done got in trouble that quick. All right. So what I'm talking about is the ideal. The ideal is that church, Christ's people, the community of Jesus, the ecclesia, the called out community. What I'm suggesting is an ideal, the ideal world, the world, the in the mind of Jesus, in the heart of Jesus. The church becomes a validator. Those who come in contact with church people, they experience validation, right? That's the ideal. But the real is, too often when people come in contact with church, what they get is a level of invalidation that's rooted in a toxic understanding of a God that has decided only to love certain people, but to hate others. And so what people get is, get right before you go to hell. And I'm not even trying to argue with you about whether that, I'm not going there about, what I'm saying is we send folk to hell quick, but we don't know how to walk with people and give them validation that affirms them. You are God's child. That affirms that they matter. That recognizes their identity, their story. That gives them voice. That lets their voice be heard in a non-judgmental way. We don't often do that. We do just the opposite. And I want to suggest that we get to the place where we are functioning in the ideal versus the real, Because get this now, people need validation. And if people get validation, they will begin to live this life that John 10:10 talks about. Well, my time is up. Y'all gave me 6 minutes more. I thank you all so very much. I'm sorry for the technological issues tied with Facebook and StreamYard. Has nothing to do with us. I wish it was better because I missed the interaction in the comments. But I hope you'll watch this on YouTube. We'll put up the link on our Facebook page when this is over. Watch it, share it. I would love to hear from you. Send me an email. I would love to get. Don't forget, this is our last Bible study in this series. I will see y'all Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the 12th of June, for our sizzling summer at St. Luke Summer Book Club. We're going to read the book Cast, The Origin of Our Discontent. Again, I'm asking you to sign up for this. There'll be a QR code that will lead you to a registration form with a link to how you can get the book. I need to have you do that by the 5th of June at the latest, because there is a digital study guide that you will get that you need to use as you read. We're not just coming together. Let me be clear about this. If you come to Pastor's Book Club, to the Sizzling Summer at St. Luke's Book Club, and you haven't read, that ain't gonna be a pretty sight, right? So we want you to come prepared. So if you get the study guide, you'll know in advance and you'll come ready to go. Listen, don't forget, we always need your support to keep us doing what we're doing. I want to tell you all, I have enjoyed this season of Bible study from January to now. We have been consistent. God is blessed. I thank God for y'all. Listen, God loves you, and so do I. I'll see you in 2 weeks for our Summer Book Club. Peace out.